The end of the Clone Wars did not come with a bang, but with a calculated risk. In 19 BBY, the Jedi Council faced a choice that would determine the fate of the Republic. General Grievous was hiding on Utapau, and Supreme Chancellor Palpatine specifically requested Anakin Skywalker for the mission. The Council refused and sent Obi-Wan Kenobi instead. This single decision is often overlooked, but it was the most important tactical move of the entire war. Had anyone else gone to Utapau, the galaxy would have fallen into darkness centuries earlier. This story explains why Obi-Wan Kenobi was the only hero capable of defeating the droid general. Darth Sidious engineered the entire scenario to isolate Anakin Skywalker. By 19 BBY, the Chancellor knew that Obi-Wan Kenobi was the primary anchor keeping Anakin grounded in the light. Sidious needed Kenobi gone, so he leaked Grievous's location to the Council, expecting them to send their best warriors. His request for Anakin to lead the campaign was a reverse psychology gambit. He knew the Council would fear his growing influence and deny the request out of spite or caution. This played perfectly into his hands. By sending Obi-Wan away, Sidious removed the one person who could have talked sense into Anakin during his moment of crisis. The tragedy on Coruscant began the moment Obi-Wan's ship left the atmosphere. Sending Anakin Skywalker to fight General Grievous would have been a disaster for unexpected reasons. Anakin practiced Form 5 Djem So, a style built on brute strength and counterattacking. Against a normal opponent, he was unstoppable, but Grievous was not a normal opponent. The general possessed cybernetic strength that rivaled or exceeded Anakin's own physical power. In a contest of pure force, Grievous had the advantage of 4 mechanical arms and a duranium chassis that felt no pain. Anakin's emotional instability was also at its peak. Grievous was known for psychological warfare and taunting Jedi to break their concentration. A focused Anakin might have won, but the conflicted and sleep-deprived Anakin of 19 BBY was a liability waiting to be exploited. Mace Windu stated clearly that Obi-Wan Kenobi was the master of Soresu. Form 3 is the defensive style designed to create an impenetrable wall against blaster fire and strikes. Against Grievous and his ability to deliver over 20 strikes per second with 4 lightsabers, an aggressive offense was suicide. Most Jedi died fighting Grievous because they tried to match his speed or overpower him. But Obi-Wan did the opposite and waited. His entire combat philosophy was built on patience and efficiency. He didn't need to strike harder than Grievous because he just needed to survive the storm until the general made a mistake. This specific stylistic matchup is why the Council's decision was tactically perfect, even if it was politically manipulated. If you are enjoying this detailed look at the Clone Wars, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We release detailed Star Wars analysis like this every single week. We now return to the events on Utapau. Obi-Wan's arrival on Utapau showcased his unique approach to warfare. Anakin might have led a frontal assault with the 501st, but Kenobi infiltrated the Pau City sinkhole alone. He located the Separatist Council and chose to reveal himself only when he had the psychological high ground. His drop into the middle of thousands of battle droids was not recklessness, but a calculated distraction. By drawing every eye and weapon to himself, he bought time for Commander Cody and the 212th Attack Battalion to secure landing zones. This willingness to be the bait was a hallmark of Kenobi's heroism. He stood alone against an army while armed only with a lightsaber and a witty remark. When General Grievous shed his cloak and ignited 4 stolen lightsabers, the visual terror alone was enough to freeze most opponents. Obi-Wan simply settled into his opening stance. The fight that followed was a masterclass in economy of motion. Grievous spun his blades like buzzsaws and advanced with the intent to shred the Jedi Master. Obi-Wan parried every strike with minimal effort as he moved his blade only inches to deflect attacks that would have cleaved through stone. He systematically dismantled the general's offense and sliced off hands by targeting the gaps in Grievous's defense rather than using raw power. It was a victory of precision over chaos. Within minutes, the feared Jedi killer was forced to turn and run. Grievous fled on his Shmoo 6 wheelbike, which was a vehicle designed for impossible terrain. Obi-Wan's choice of pursuit was equally unconventional, as he rode a native Varactyl named Boga. This chase sequence demonstrated Kenobi's adaptability. Grievous relied on technology and thrust, but Obi-Wan trusted in the Force and his bond with a living creature to navigate the vertical city. The pursuit forced Grievous to his personal ship, the Soulless One, where the final confrontation would take place. During this chase, Obi-Wan lost his lightsaber, For any other Jedi, being disarmed against Grievous would mean death. For Kenobi, it was just another complication to improvise around.
The final moments of the battle were brutal and desperate. Stripped of his Jedi weapon, Obi-Wan engaged a cyborg in hand-to-hand combat, which was a physically impossible matchup he should have lost. Grievous had the strength to crush a human skull, and he nearly did. Obi-Wan's connection to the Force allowed him to manipulate the environment. Hanging from the edge of the landing platform, he summoned Grievous's own weapon, the DT-57 Annihilator Blaster. 5 shots to the exposed organ sac later, the war was effectively over. Obi-Wan tossed the blaster aside with disdain and called it so uncivilized. It was a moment of supreme irony where the perfect Jedi used a weapon he despised to save a republic that was already crumbling. For a brief hour, Obi-Wan Kenobi was the greatest hero in the galaxy. He had ended the Clone Wars, and the droid armies were shutting down. He likely felt a deep sense of relief as he imagined a return to the temple and a peaceful life of training younglings. That victory was the trigger for the ultimate betrayal. Palpatine used the death of Grievous as the signal to initiate Order 66. The moment Obi-Wan reunited with Commander Cody, the clone received the encrypted order. The troops Obi-Wan had led for 3 years turned their cannons on him, and the hero of the Republic became enemy number 1 in a heartbeat. Obi-Wan's survival on Utapau was as miraculous as his victory. Falling hundreds of feet into a sinkhole lake would have killed most beings, but his resourcefulness saved him again. Unlike other Jedi Masters like Plo Koon or Aayla Secura, who were gunned down by their troops, Obi-Wan was isolated when the attack happened. This isolation, combined with his defensive mindset, allowed him to escape the initial purge. He didn't panic and instead adapted. He stole Grievous's starfighter and fled the planet not to hide, but to find answers. His ability to compartmentalize his trauma and focus on the mission is what separates him from Anakin. Consider the alternative outcome if the Council had granted Palpatine's request and sent Anakin to Utapau. The result would have been catastrophic. Anakin might have killed Grievous, but he would have been a prime target for Palpatine's manipulation over long-range comms while isolated on a remote planet. Order 66 could have been executed while Anakin was surrounded by the 501st. It is unclear if they would have fired on him, or if he would have joined them immediately. Her fate would have been entirely in Palpatine's hands, without Obi-Wan on Coruscant to check on Padme. The galaxy might have seen a fully turned Vader leading the separatist droid armies as a new warlord. Obi-Wan's return to the Jedi Temple was the grimmest task of his life. He didn't return as a conqueror, but as a witness. Discovering the security recordings of Anakin killing younglings broke him more than any physical wound could. But he remained the hero the galaxy needed. He reconfigured the emergency beacon to warn surviving Jedi away from Coruscant. This single act saved hundreds of Jedi from returning to a death trap. Yoda went to face the Emperor, and Obi-Wan accepted the burden of confronting his brother. He didn't do it for glory, but because he was the only one who could. Killing Grievous was necessary to end the war, but the true victory was that Obi-Wan walked away from Utapau alive. By surviving the duel and the following betrayal, he preserved the legacy of the Jedi Order. He carried the knowledge of the Old Republic into the Dark Times. If Grievous had killed Obi-Wan, which was a very real possibility given the General's track record, Luke Skywalker would never have been trained. Yoda would have been alone, and the rebellion would have lacked its first catalyst. Obi-Wan's victory on Utapau stopped a cyborg and secured the timeline that eventually led to the destruction of the Death Star. Heroism is not always about the medal ceremony. Obi-Wan Kenobi received no parade for killing General Grievous, and there was no Senate hearing to thank him. His reward was exile. He spent the next 19 years in the blistering heat of Tatooine, watching over a boy who didn't know he existed. He went from being the general who defeated the leader of the Separatist Alliance to a strange old hermit living in a cave. This transition changes the definition of a hero in the Star Wars universe. He did what was right not for recognition, but because the future depended on his patience. Obi-Wan Kenobi was not the most powerful Jedi, nor was he the chosen one. He didn't have Yoda's wisdom or Mace Windu's shattering power, but he was the perfect Jedi because he was the most balanced. The fight with Grievous proved this fact. He didn't win through anger or exotic powers, but through discipline. In a galaxy consuming itself with fear and hate, Obi-Wan remained steady. Taking down Grievous was his final act as a general of the Republic. It stands as the perfect example of a Jedi doing their duty by being calm, efficient, and victorious against impossible odds. Obi-Wan Kenobi became the hero who took down Grievous, not because he sought the glory,
but because he was the only one who could get the job done. His victory on Utapau was the closing chapter of the Clone Wars and the opening line of a new story. He proved that even when the galaxy burns, one person standing their ground can make a difference. The darkness rose, but because Obi-Wan survived that day, the light never truly went out. May the Force be with you.